Blog Talk Radio.
Human being of Earth, it is high time for you to change for the better and for the good. By Billy Edward Albert Meyer. The period of time of the 21st century and of the third millennium brings about gigantic and cataclysmal events for you, your Earth and its nature, which you will have to meet with intellect and rationality. The new century and millennium will bring events which you would never have imagined and which aren't solely of cosmic natural origin, but rather created by you due to your own intellect and your irrationality. It is not only those events which keep rolling across the worlds and universes endlessly, but rather those which you are to blame for. The coming events are therefore bearing witness to what you have destructively created by your obstinacy, and are furthermore creating with regard to the destruction of nature, climate change and impairment of the atmosphere. However, they also bear witness to the senselessness of your worldwide transportation of goods and of mass tourism, whereby diseases, epidemics as well as strange seeds and plants are being spread into foreign countries, among human beings, animals and among creatures as well as within the plant life, whereby many deaths are being brought about and changes and destructions are being caused in fauna and flora. Where in the world have you gone, and where are you continuing to go on in your obstinacy, human being of Earth, out of which you are causing pernicious changes and damage to nature and to the planet, are living in hatred, and urge for revenge and wars? Considering that you have spent a mere 250 years during the last 10,000 years, during which no acts of war had swept across Earth, then this should be an impulse for you to finally create peace. Truly, there is neither a God nor a religion which can bring you true love, peace, freedom and harmony, no matter how submissively fawning you are beseechingly throwing yourselves into the dust in ardent prayer. Only you and you alone have the power and the might to free yourself from all the terrible things, for you are your own Lord and Master, and only you and you alone determine your destiny, and that of the whole of humankind. There is no God and no religion which you may expect help from, and which can free you from all evil and bad. Only you and you alone bear the responsibility for anything and everything of your thoughts, feelings, deeds and actions. Therefore also only you alone are able to free yourself from hatred, urge for revenge, jealousy, urge for retaliation, lovelessness, unpeace and unfreedom, as well as from guilt, strife, squabble, discord, disharmony, murder and manslaughter, from war, crimes of guilt, criminality and all the inhumane. However, up until now you haven't done this, but you have rather steadily let yourself fall further and deeper into the abyss of ruin, and you continue with this in like manner, whereas your steadily growing overpopulation is the main reason that all your self-created terrible things and destructive machinations are increasing further. You are hastening into emptiness with your thoughts and feelings, human being of Earth, straight into a dark and deadly future, and you will only be able to avert the worst of all if you come to your senses, to rationality and intellect. You must put a stop to the senseless growth of the overpopulation as well as to all wars, all terror, hatred and unfreedom, and you must desist from your urge for revenge and jealousy, from your urge for retribution and quarrelsomeness, as well as from your disinterest towards your fellow human beings and nature, the planet and its fauna and flora. You must overcome and put an end to your lovelessness, human being of Earth, in order to create true love and feelings for others within yourself, both for yourself and for your fellow human beings all over the world, as well as for the fauna and flora, the whole nature and Earth itself. Human being of Earth, you must work your way out of the darkness of your own intellect and your irrationality, which you haven't fallen into, out of the darkness, where the demons of hatred, of war, of murder and killing, of unpeace, of jealousy, of peacelessness, disharmony, of urge for retribution and for revenge, of hatred and of unfreedom have dug their claws into you, snarling and grinning diabolically. And if you do not turn round, in order to finally find a new beginning in true love and freedom, in peace and harmony together with your earthly humankind as a whole, then you will, in your obstinate delusion and in your addiction to creating an overpopulation as well as in your destructiveness, continue to extinguish yourself as well as the fauna and flora. If you do not decide for the better and the good, and do not integrate yourself into the natural laws, and do not follow them, then your own acting resulting from your obstinacy will crush you in the time to come, and mercilessly, like with the deadly slamming fist of a giant. It will also be the fist of your megalomania, by which you personally will determine your destiny. Owing to your obstinacy, your megalomania and your self-aggrandizement, you provoke your own revenge on yourself, formed from your own irrationality, which demands accountability from you. You cannot abdicate the responsibility for your doings and actions, as well as not for your false thoughts and feelings, by which you are leading yourself into disaster, and are suggestively and forcefully bringing about an evil destiny. You are not leading your life according to the true sense of existence, for truthfully it is to a great extent only lies and deception, filled with hate, greed, lust and addiction, with murder, war and with other crimes and acts of guilt. Up until now, you have not fulfilled your life's purpose duty, but rather made use of your existence for waging war, for murdering and killing, for destruction, for the fulfillment of your greed, for might, for envy, stinginess and for retaliation and revenge, for hatred of every kind and for greedy financial enrichment. Thus you have lost the being human in the real and true sense, and with it also your own dignity and the venerability for the ones next to you, the fellow human beings, the whole humankind, the planet and its nature, fauna and flora. You have not lived, and do not live according to the creative natural laws, but only according to tremendously fallible laws, which you have made yourself, and which will lead you far away from what is rightful, fair and righteous. Truly, you have disparagingly trampled true love, life's benevolence and all the laws of nature into the dirt, while the dignity anchored therein was sadly accepting your devilish actions, giving you a last chance over and over again, in order to eventually remind you of true love and faithfulness in the course of time, and enabling you to find your way back to the natural, as this is given by the natural principles of existence. However, you, human being of earth, have consciously disregarded any ever so good opportunity and disparagingly dragged it through the mire, for due to your obstinacy, your self-aggrandizement and due to your megalomania, you wanted and still want to lead a life which satisfies your evil degeneracies. And today, as a matter of fact, you are leading a life in selfishness, lust and greed, in hatred, overbearance, greed for might and war, in destruction, jealousy, strife and discord, as well as in unpeace, unfreedom, disharmony and lovelessness. You neither bother about those next to you, even less about your fellow human being and about humankind as a whole, as well as not about good interpersonal relationships, nor about dignity and true humanity. This, however, takes its toll not only in the present time, but also in the future through the coming events and happenings, which can hardly be averted, if at all. Human being of earth, truly, you must undertake everything, in order to being able to face this great and new time in a good and valuable measure, and so therefore, finally free yourself from your traditional, false and most destructive way of life, from your hatred against those next to you, against people who think differently and those who are of another religion. Also free yourself from your quarrelsomeness, from your mad addiction to war, revenge and retaliation, move on from jealousy, stinginess and discord, as well as from the addiction to great riches, resentment and to numerous offspring, for all of these are degeneracies of evil. Avoid further overpopulation and turn yourself to the true joys of life, which are true and honest love, real peace, true freedom and ample harmony. Human being of earth, all of this concerns not only your whole humankind, but mainly you as an individual, for all those good many individuals form the humankind of this world, which is a diabolical and demonic world full of disharmony and darkness, because you have turned it into this as an individual and together with humankind as a whole. So you as an individual are asked to direct your life and the existence of the planet as well as its nature and fauna and flora towards the true life, love, peace, freedom and harmony. You must leave the paths of ruin, the path of disharmony with nature and the creative principles on which you are wandering about. Truly, However, you are still wandering about on the path of death straight into a bottomless abyss full of incredible torment and deadly ruin, which is lying in wait for you, in order to tear you into its blood-sopping claws, and to crush you mercilessly. You must free yourself from your going astray, otherwise the bony claw-armed fist of your unintellect and your irrationality will snatch you from your life, and cast you into the abyss of the all-ruining destruction. You still have a last true chance, which you can use, if you turn to everything that brings you further in a rational way, whereby the rational also demands that you become conscious of your responsibility, and put an end to the increase of your overpopulation. You as a single human being of this earth must do everything conceivably possible, good and right, in order to be able to preserve yourself and humankind as a whole, as well as nature and its fauna and flora, from the tormentful end, which the cataclysmal events and occurrences are already giving evidence of at the present time, and which will continue to turn out to be even worse in the time to come. Human being of Earth, you still have a really very last chance, which you, however, will have to seize now, because otherwise you will not be able to prevent the worst anymore. Now do not believe that all those false prophets and scientists are right, who play down everything, and declare everything as completely natural with respect to the degenerating development of nature, of the climate, and the false development regarding your consciousness and behavior. Consider that time doesn't stand still, and that your devastating malicious machinations will therefore continue to proceed, if you do not finally consciously call a halt to them. If you do not do this, then it will be too late one unpleasant day, and there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth, as it is written from time immemorial. And the old prophecies of the true prophets have proved to be true over thousands of years up to this new time, and this is exactly what they will do furthermore, but you can still avert much thereof, if you let your rationality and your intellect prevail and henceforth do the right things. Already for decades all kinds of natural catastrophes have disastrously increased, as have the degeneracies among human beings, and all this bears witness that the cataclysms cannot be stopped anymore, but can only be mitigated in their worst forms. But, human being of Earth, you must finally advance the evolution of your consciousness, and take the responsibility into your own hands, instead of demanding it from a god or a religion and from the belief in these, since help will never come from them, but solely from yourself. You yourself must direct your thoughts and feelings as well as your actions, doings and activities, because it is now a requirement. You as human being of Earth must learn to esteem the basic elements and components of nature and of life, even though your consciousness is still limited, and to bring your own world of thoughts and feelings to react, in order not to furthermore destroy in your delusion myriad-fold life of nature and its fauna and flora, the climate of Earth, and finally yourself. Therefore, human being of Earth, I raise my voice, and shout out the well-appropriate warning and my demand, so that you may eventually awaken from your lethargy of disregarding the facts as well as from your destructive rage. It is a warning which is based on the present events and on all those that have been appearing for a long time, which will carry further and further into the future to a terrible extent. I have already called in the past, but my calling has faded away in the desert of your irrationality and your unintellect. The time has already come at which the climatic conditions all over the world have starkly changed, for which you bear the blame, and enormous natural disasters are occurring, and this will also continuously have an effect in the future through extreme storms of all kinds. Everything has already escalated to such an extent that a vast number of human lives, running into hundreds of thousands and into millions, have been lost, and will continue to be lost. Together with enormous destruction of all human achievements, also more and more diseases and epidemics will spread, which will take a heavy toll on the lives of your species, human being of Earth. All disaster will expand steadily further on, destructions on mountains through rock slides, due to the thawing of the permafrost will take place, and due to volcanic activity, large portions of mountains will be blasted away, which will rush down into the valley as mud flows, destroying everything, wiping out entire villages and cities and claiming a great many human lives. The glaciers and poles are melting on a worldwide scale, and also more and more deserts are forming. The world climate is warming up rapidly, and this leads to enormous climatic upheavals, which will bring more and more great heat waves and cold waves, conflagrations, droughts, inundations, snowstorms, hailstorms, and tremendously powerful storms in its wake. Also, earthquakes and seaquakes will occur with increasing frequency, as will enormous tsunamis in the oceans and lakes resulting therefrom. Thus, further devastating destruction of nature and of your achievements arise. And vast landscapes will be destroyed by natural disasters and due to the growth of the overpopulation, since you require more and more housing and living space. A great number of natural disasters and wars, as well as machinations of sex and acts of guilt, are increasingly leading to mass deaths of your species. Enormous material damage to land, houses, and to various buildings, to streets, railway tracks, mountain torrents, creeks, rivers, and lakes will arise. And as was frequently said in the past, more and more human lives will be lost through the climate-induced upheavals and thunderstorms, as well as due to mass murders, for the rapid and increasing climate warming. And climate change is not only changing the entire nature and the ocean currents, which will cause massive upheavals, but also your consciousness in a depraving way. Through this you, human being of Earth, will become more and more indifferent and without feelings towards yourself and towards your fellow human beings. Thus your good interpersonal relationships will also increasingly suffer from it and will become continuously rarer. The entire plant world and animal kingdom are also changing catastrophically, whereby a great number of mutations come into existence, also among you, whereby above all else the overpopulation bears the blame for everything. This is indisputably the utmost evil on earth, because the further and the faster the population grows, the greater, more extensive, and more insolvable all the problems become that result from it. As to that, there are degeneracies existing across the board, therefore in medicine, in the decreasing drinking water, in the depleting consumption of energy, as well as in the steadily increasing worldwide, amply destroying and epidemic spreading mass tourism, in terrorism, in wars, as well as in other armed conflicts. The wars, instigated by your greedy and felonious mindful ones of state, won't come to an end, if you, human being of Earth, don't finally put a stop to all the felonious acts, as an individual and as a mass of people. However, family tragedies also become more and more rampant, as do the many cases of killing by your psychically disturbed adolescents, and also by older offenders, who are trying to solve their problems with a flight into murdering. However, the escalating problems are also multiplying due to the air pollution, water pollution, and pollution of the environment, as well as due to the growing crime and due to the felonies of guilt, as well as due to the general health, consciousness-related, psychic and physical weakening, which you have already fallen prey to for a long time, and are increasingly falling prey to. Beneficial leisure activities also belong to the problems, which can no longer be coped with, for instead of engaging in such an activity, you are only seeking crazy pleasure and idleness, or extreme and life-endangering sports, because you, human being of Earth, are not even able to appraise your own life as valuable anymore, let alone the one of the person next to you and the one of the fellow human being. Inevitably, your hard-hearted and cursing towards your fellow human beings and nature, as well as towards the fauna and flora, also increases as a result of this. You, human being of Earth, are becoming increasingly predisposed to allergies and diseases, to epidemics and degeneracies of the sexual life, to psychic degeneracies, to depressions and suicides, to psychopathic and paranoid moods, from which murders and mass murders, as well as maltreatments of fellow humans are resulting, which are increasingly being perpetrated by teenagers, because their whole education is failing completely in every respect. You are increasingly appearing as a chicken-hearted person, who is throwing his life away, because you have become incapable and afraid of bearing pain and misery, and of ending your days through a natural death. And you have also become chicken-hearted with respect to helping those next to you and your fellow human beings when they are being harassed or attacked by others, as you have also become chicken-hearted with regard to helping the aged and handicapped people. Human being of Earth, you are causing disaster for the planet and for all life on an unprecedented scale. The destructions of nature as well as of fauna and flora, and of life caused by you are sweeping over the whole Earth. You have caused enormous damage, destructions as well as hardship and misery, and keep on causing them. You have straightened torrents and creeks, and have dug drainage ditches across the wetlands, in order to make them habitable to you. So the creeks and rivulets became powerful rivers, rivers became raging currents, while wild waters are bursting their banks and causing enormous inundations, which are devastating all land, destroying a vast number of your achievements and existences, and together with other catastrophes are claiming hundreds of thousands and millions of human lives. And all of what happens today in no way means the end of the worldwide catastrophes, which you bear the blame for triggering. For only in the now new millennium, everything is getting even worse, because nature will rise up even more gigantically against your environment, destroying insanity and attain an extent which bears comparison with the primeval times of Earth. Considering and analyzing the coming events and catastrophes which are going to break upon Earth, the climate and you, human being of Earth, then it is clearly and obviously recognizable that solely you bear the blame for the whole misery. Namely, as already explained, due to the relentlessly increasing overpopulation, as a result of which all the enormous problems are arising. This can no longer be stopped with simple means, but only by means of worldwide radical and rigorous laws and measures, whose compliance you must ensure. The blame for the coming disaster and chaos as well as catastrophes arises fundamentally due to your gigantic mass of humankind. Even if you as a pathologically dumb and irresponsible scientist, or know-it-all claim the opposite. Solely your overpopulation is the comprehensive factor of all terrible things, namely concerning the energy and drinking water shortage as well as regarding the destruction of nature and the environment, and also with regard to climate warming, new diseases and epidemics, guilt crimes, hatred, unfreedom, lovelessness, unpeace and disharmony, and so on and so forth. And the more your overpopulation is growing, the more extensive and unmanageable all the problems and terrible things become. If an existing problem of this or that kind resulting from the overpopulation is being approached, and a solution is being found and carried into effect, then the whole thing is being overtaken by emerging problems of the same or a similar or new kind during the time of the implementation of the solution, because the world population is increasing further by hundreds of millions of people during the time at which solutions are being implemented, whereby the solutions worked out become null and void, and are being overtaken by similar new problems. Also the asylum system, the neo-Nazi organizations and extremist organizations, mass migrations, worldwide terrorism and new wars will spread and constantly cause more unpeace, hardship and misery and other new big problems. Very harsh and effective measures must be taken against all terrible things that come from you, human being of Earth, and which you have unleashed against all life, against nature, against the climate, against the atmosphere, against the bodies of water as well as against fauna and flora and against the whole planet, due to the irrationality of the cultivated overpopulation. This also includes measures against the world domination craving machinations of those mightful ones of state, who feloniously trigger wars and terror all over the world, execute wars and acts of terrorism themselves and precipitate other countries into chaos, whereas they also intend to trample the mentality of the people into the dirt as well as break and eradicate their religion and politics. As long as you submit to these machinations, and don't take a stand against these felonies, and don't bring the right people into the corresponding governmental positions, until then you will create neither true love, true peace, true freedom nor harmony on Earth. Due to the rapid growth of your humankind, human being of Earth, you are forced to destroy the environment, and to exploit the resources of Earth more and with increasing frequency, in order to meet everyone's increasing needs. But all these needs increase to an even greater extent with the growing number of your humanity, whereby both nature and the fauna and flora, as well as the climate and the entire environment, are being increasingly affected and destroyed. The planet itself is being tormented and slowly destroyed, because atomic and other types of explosions caused by wars are disturbing the structure of the Earth, and triggering earthquakes and seaquakes as well as volcanic eruptions. Waters, nature, the atmosphere and the near-Earth space are becoming polluted and poisoned, while the primeval forests are greedily destroyed and razed. Already in September 1964 I wrote the following to all international governments: the need of the hour and of the future is that the insanity of the overpopulation must finally be stopped. Although the climate change triggered by humankind cannot be stopped anymore through this, the destructions, demolishments, the chaos and the catastrophes can nevertheless be gotten under control somewhat through rationality and intellect, for example by rebuilding natural wetlands, and ceasing the overexploitation of the planet as well as of nature and fauna and flora, because only in this way can the worst still be avoided. However, this requires that the insanity of the overpopulation is being stopped by effective legal measures. The overpopulation risk the world population must be most urgently gotten under control and reduced by means of a worldwide controlled birth stop, because only through this can all the in every respect increasing needs of humankind and the further destructions connected with it finally be brought to an end. Very much has already been set in motion, that the old prophecies are being fulfilled, wherefore it is also necessary to take steps against it. The pollution of the environment through fossil fuel engines of all kinds, as well as through chimneys etc., must be gotten under control most urgently, together with all other forms of environmental pollution and atmospheric contamination. It is also of the most vital necessity to keep endangered avalanche zones and inundation areas clear of all human buildings of every description, such as residential buildings and factories etc. Wetlands etc. must be given back to nature as natural water collection areas for flood waters. Residential buildings and factories etc. must no longer be built along torrents, creeks, at lakefronts, in or on avalanche slopes or plains endangered by water etc. Moreover, precautionary measures must most urgently be taken along creeks, rivers, lakes, streets, residential areas, slopes and mountains etc., by raising very strong and tall control structures in endangered places, where wild waters overflow or mudflows, snow avalanches and mudslides, as well as mountain slides can possibly come down and cause damage, in order to preserve houses, streets, paths and railway lines from undercutting, inundation, spillage and from being torn away. This will be necessary in many places, because much of the predicted chaos and the catastrophes will unfortunately already be unavoidable, and time is of the essence and is getting short. Therefore action is called for, and this is the responsibility of the entire earthly humankind. Human being of Earth must take action, before it is definitely too late, and nothing at all can be done anymore, in order to stop the irresponsibly triggered process of the destruction of the climate, of the fauna and flora as well as of nature and of the planet and the extinction of humankind. Where are you going, humankind of this earth? Quo vadis, humanitas. You are straying down the path of darkness, on the path leading to ruin with no return. Save yourself, because it isn't too late yet for a complete change in order to walk on the path of light, of the creative natural, on the light path of the truth of the ever-present creative principles, the path of the good itself. Human being, turn your back on your present life, and find your way back to the creative natural laws and recommendations. Find your way back to the true path of the real life. However, the way cannot be found and taken through religion or sectarianism. Therefore, it isn't satisfying that you hurry to church daily or every Sunday, in order to appear brilliant there, that you of all people are one of those who are diligent churchgoers, in order to listen to the word of the clergyman at every opportunity and, if possible, to sit in the front row right beside him, so that everyone can see you well and notice that you are diligently listening to the word of God and are so close to the clergyman, are going to the mosque, to the temple, to the synagogue, or into any house of prayer, in order to pray, or that not a single word of the ministering religious representative slips your attention. Human being, such doing is no law of the creative truth, nor creative natural foreordination or regulation, and it isn't the sense of life. If you cannot find the path of truth from your own cognition, and do not profoundly understand the word of truth, place your trust in it and follow it, then it will be better for you if you crawl away into the deepest slough of disgrace. If you are not treading the path of the truth of the creative natural laws and recommendations, then let at least those who want to pursue it, and are looking for the effective truth, find this path unhindered. Do not curse and condemn those who are searching for the truth, for their stride and their presence on the pathway of truth are not for their own glory and not for shining like a beryl, but for the evolution of their consciousness, as is predefined for the human being by the creative laws, as the sense of life. Anchored therein is also the entire human behavior in every respect, namely with regard to the fellow human beings, to humanity, nature, fauna and flora, the climate of the world and the planet itself. If you act contrary to this, however, human being of earth, then your own judgment will befall you, before you become aware of this, because the era of the coming events is approaching, and there is no more time left to gamble with the further cultivation of the overpopulation and with the destruction of the climate, as you have done this up to now as an individual and as a mass of humankind. For far too long, you have gambled with all terrible things and treated everything abominably, but now it's the final straw, for it is said already since time immemorial, the jug goes to the well until it breaks. Humankind and human being as an individual, whether poor or rich, whether small, tall, beggar or workman, human being in any position, it concerns you. My words are addressed to you. Turn around and take the path of the true life, as determined by the creative natural laws and recommendations, for time is getting short, until great disaster will befall the world and you, and demand accountability from you for all the destructions that you have caused among humankind and to the whole nature, to the fauna and flora, to the climate, to the atmosphere, as well as to the bodies of water and elsewhere around due to the overpopulation. In the scriptures of the millenniums is written, love your next one as yourself, because he is your own brother or your own sister, into whom life has been breathed. Therefore, human being, put an end to all your hatred, to your greed, to the daily strife, to the murderous wars and acts of terrorism, to all your egotism, self-aggrandizement, to your cravings for revenge, to your jealousy, greed for might and urge for retaliation. Turn your back on your murdering, deceitful attacks, killing and torturing, on prostitution, on hatred of every kind, on greed and avarice, on your dishonesty, unfairness and unrighteousness, as well as on your addictions, vices, and on anything else degenerate. Love those next to you as yourself. Love your fellow human beings, nature, fauna and flora, as well as the planet, which is your home and your aegis. Therefore, as written, pay attention to the signs of the times, which will be in the sky, when the time is near at which cataclysmal events will take place. Human being as an individual, heed these signs of the times, learn to understand them and don't misinterpret them. Be conscious of their truth, and do not regard them as some strange miracles, because a miracle is only a word as a term, the value of which, however, carries no weight. Regard the signs for what they are, the product of a mightful law, which you have broken by the overpopulation and all the problems resulting from this, and thereby have caused enormous changes and destructions in nature, in fauna and flora, as well as of the climate, and of the planet itself, and have brought plight, murder, crime, war, terror, misery and ruin upon the world and humankind. The signs in the sky are mainly signs of the consequences of human irrationality, signs which become apparent as devastating storms of all kind, because the climate warming and climate destruction as well as the environmental destruction have developed and continue to form into unimaginable catastrophes. This is already part of everyday life, but you, human being of Earth, still haven't recognized and haven't understood that you bear the blame for these evil events yourself. Guilty, because you continue to drive up overpopulation, and are thereby creating always more gigantic insoluble problems, which you cannot master anymore. Therefore turn around, before it is definitely too late, because you can still do something in order to avoid the major catastrophes. But act fast, because otherwise it will be too late, because then, the disastrous consequences of your heinous doings cannot be stopped anymore, and nature, life, the planet and the climate will let the results of human irrationality unleash on humankind and the planet with a primeval guilt. Even though the process of the destruction of climate and nature can hardly be stopped anymore, it is still possible to some degree, if the overpopulation is decreased by a radical cessation of births, which would reduce all of the problems. If this doesn't happen, then the problems of all kinds will go sky high and cannot be overcome anymore. As a result of this, however, the existence of the entire humankind and of the planet is being put at risk and brought into question. Therefore, it may be that the earthly humankind will eradicate and exterminate itself one day, due to its irrationality and due to its unintellect and egoism. And there will not be an imaginatively fabulated God, who will have an ear for your humankind, human being of earth, in order to answer your senseless submissive pleas for forgiveness and prevention of all evil, because since no such God exists, it also can neither listen to anything, nor provide any help either. Fundamentally, it is you alone, human being of earth, who is your own ruler and master, for you alone are God and therefore comprehensively bear the responsibility for all your doing and acting, for all your thoughts and feelings as well as for your entire destiny, of which you alone are the architect. Therefore, it is solely within your own discretion, within yourself, within your thoughts and feelings as well as within your rationality, your intellect and responsibility to eventually bring about true love, freedom, harmony and true peace within yourself and among the entire earthly humankind. Consider, human being of earth, you alone are urged to and able to accomplish this, and to create a paradise on earth, where the high values of love, of freedom and harmony and of peace are being honored, appreciated and held in high esteem, because there is neither a God creator nor any other God, Holy One, angel or tin God, who could do this for you. You alone are the ruler and master of your life and of all the things that you ever think up and cause by your feelings, deeds and actions. Consequently, you and you alone bear full responsibility for anything and everything. Billy, May 21st, 2009, 18.38H.
Dangers of Third Millennium. If you human beings of Earth do not turn to the truth of creation and its laws and recommendations in what is now the Third Millennium, if you do not turn to better and good things, and do not follow the true rules of life, as they exist in the creational laws and recommendations, then all evil events of all kinds will broaden in ever-worsening succession. The creational natural laws and recommendations are written in the goblet of truth and in the spiritual teaching, which is the teaching of truth, the teaching of spirit, the teaching of life, which it is of vital importance to follow. However, if you human beings continue to fail to follow the creational laws and recommendations, evil and catastrophes of all kinds, which have existed all over Earth for a long time, will increase in future into much more evil excrescences. And if you do not change for the better, for good and the best, all evil over the world will take a much worse form than it has done for decades and also does at present, and the coming events will be such as the world has never experienced up to the current time, nor lived, nor seen. A change for the better, for good and the best can only occur, however, if you human beings of Earth think and act rightly and rationally from now on and into the future, and this principally applies to your rulers and other mightful people, who have to lead you as a people to the best and for goodness. This thinking and acting, which is full of rationality, is also demanded from every individual in your entire humanity, as well as from you as such in your entirety. And success can only come about if your thoughts are rightly cared for and deeds are determined and performed rightly, indeed in accordance with the urgency of the necessity for change. However, If this change is not tackled and carried through, then it is unavoidable and inevitable that the prophecies will come true, as is the case with the predictions that are firm with regard to their fulfillment, and which will certainly turn into an evil reality. Overall, in all things of your present existence as human beings of Earth, a change for the better, for good and the best is unavoidable, if everything is still to develop ultimately into something of good worth after all. However, if this change is not started and carried through, then do not be surprised if nothing turns to the better, for good and the best, but the negative, bad and evil things are fulfilled, as has been prophetically stated although without being specifically called prophecies, so that it is not possible for you to differentiate between prophecy and prediction for the important reason that not only individual factors are ceased for change, but entirely everything of all circumstances. And this must be the case, because given a true effort, it is only possible to bring about the better, good and the best through an all-encompassing change, providing everything is taken into account extensively. Therefore, the following prophetic and predictive words are to be stated finally by me, Billy Beam, as the last proclaimer in the line of 7 of Nokodemon. With the third millennium, you human beings of Earth have passed from the darkness of the last 2 millennia into the gloom of what is for you an impenetrable labyrinth of false modes of behavior, and already in the 20th century you have brought about all kinds of evil, and are continuing to create and cultivate the same, which has brought disaster over you, nature and the planet to an incalculable extent, and will continue to do so. Your greed for profit, you human beings of Earth, is continuing to abound more and more, and the people in power in your world are casting your populations of all states into ever deeper misery, making self-aggrandizing and megalomaniacal decisions over your heads, and taking all the power of determination away from you as a people. Everything is a matter of might and money, and from now on everything will become worse in this regard, as will catastrophes of all kinds in nature, in the climate and amongst you human beings, caused by the breakneck speed of population growth, which has become uncontrollable overpopulation. Everything is constantly and increasingly directed towards hierarchy, money, income, profit and gain as well as productivity due to the efforts of those who are greedy for profit in might, an attitude which is however spreading more and more amongst individual human beings and your entire peoples. Therefore, you are becoming ever more indifferent to one another, more mistrustful of one another and increasingly emotionless, disinterested, indolent and obtuse in interpersonal relationships, which is causing simple human connections to be destroyed and entire families to be ruined. Under such unbearable circumstances, many amongst you will feel blazing anger rise up within you and will therefore torment other fellow human beings, or even extract bloody revenge on them. However, trust amongst you human beings will vanish to an increasing extent, leading to ever-worsening forms of jealousy and hatred arising in many of you, whether because of a difference of opinion or a different belief, because of money, goods and chattels, or simply because the face, body, clothing or behavior of the other person provokes you. Therefore, there will be increasing guilt amongst you, and not only because some people simply find it good and satisfying when they torment, beat, spit on, tread down or humiliate others, even accepting the death of those being tormented. And in the future, guilt, murder and deliberate as well as malicious and warlike destruction will prevail amongst you, something which will in its entirety also be carried into space near Earth, and in fact not only in particular, when worlds close to Earth are settled by human beings of Earth. You human beings of Earth increasingly want to seize the might of creation for yourselves, and the longer this continues, the more you know no limits, and imagine yourselves to be the highest and mightiest form of life on Earth and in the universe. However, vengeance will be extracted, when all your doings turn sooner or later to your own harm, and as a result of which you fall into a deep abyss. The tall buildings that tower into the clouds as skyscrapers will collapse, the fields will lie in waste and therefore it will no longer be possible to bring in any harvests. And the longer this continues, the more you as individual human beings will make your own laws, in accordance with which you terrorize the environment and your fellow human beings, as is already the case in many places due to extremists, terrorists, young people, people full of hatred and consumed with a desire for revenge, and people who are confused, as well as autocrats, who take it upon themselves to inflict punishments. many of you will fall back into barbarity, and hunger will increasingly ravage the world, because many natural foodstuffs are misused for purposes other than for food, due to the greed for profit and might. Take for example the biofuels used for powering machinery and engines. Lubricants will also be manufactured for these using foodstuffs, and these are only two of many examples with regard to the misuse of foodstuffs. Climate change caused by the overpopulation of your earthly humanity will entail huge natural catastrophes, which will become ever worse and also impinge on your own lives. As a result, in future ever more severe droughts and periods of cold weather as well as vast storms of all kinds, rainstorms and firestorms brought forth by forest fires will scourge the entire earth, and bring about destructions full of guilt, as will also be the case due to an increase in earthquakes and undersea quakes, landslides, storm surges, tsunamis and volcanic eruptions, floods and high tides. Therefore, in the course of the coming time, hundreds of thousands and even millions of you human beings will lose your lives, whilst others will not be able to withstand all the misery and will seek death at their own hands. Others still will increasingly turn to drugs, which have been partially legalized through the irrationality of those in power, because they are too stupid to recognize the danger of drug addiction and its consequences, or because they themselves are profiting from the drug trade. Only very few people are troubled by the fact that this destroys the body, the psyche and even the life of the addicts, or by the fact that this means more and more murders and suicides take place as do rapes, criminal and unlawful deeds, and many of you people act like wild beasts, and the situation has existed for decades. Therefore, criminality, crime and capital offenses are increasing, as guilt is burgeoning unstoppably. Indeed, this is in relation to the increase in overpopulation. Guilt acts committed by young people are on the rise, just as is their carrying and use of weapons of all kinds which they employ unscrupulously, resulting in the injury and even death of innocent people, as is also the case with extremist groups that carry out guilt acts. Very many of you place less and less value on the physical and psychic integrity of people of your kind, as a result of which you harm your fellow human beings, injure them physically and psychically, and you do not even shrink from killing and murdering them. By these means, the life of many of you will become truly catastrophic and hellish, and this will only come to an end when you are carried off by death. However, this will not be sufficient in the future, because the addiction to pleasure and amusement, as well as to holiday travel, is increasing just as unstoppably and always entails an ever greater disaster, just as you men and women soon get divorced from one another and live apart, or if you come together frivolously and get married or live together in apparent friendship and companionship. And it will increasingly be the case that you as men and women embark on sexual relations with one another without getting to know one another more closely and, in wild passion, bring unwanted children into the world, who grow up without fathers, and indeed never get to know their father. And, furthermore, in this way you will spread plagues such as AIDS, syphilis, tuberculosis and other scourges, so that in this regard evil will spread from bed to bed and from person to person. Therefore in future, the sexuality that you human beings of earth incorrectly believe to be true love will end up as an evil scourge. Good morality is increasingly becoming lost amongst you, as is righteousness, respect for life, love, decency and fairness. True friendship, companionship, bonds and love are already hard to find, and are becoming more so, whilst freedom has long since become a charade and will remain so for a long time, as will peace. This is because actions are only predicated on what is currently popular without any responsibility and entirely unscrupulously. Therefore, more and more parents are sexually abusing their own children, and abuse is taking place between siblings, as well as an increase in rapes between woman and man, woman and woman, man and man, whilst many ecclesiastics and educators, etc. are also sexually abusing those under their protection, and more pedophiles are committing sexual crimes against children, as has already occurred in many cases. Just as immorality and sexual degeneracy have been propagated for years now in cinema and on television, this will continue in a much broader form in the future as well. Whoever speaks and teaches the truth with regard to creation and its laws and recommendations doesn't want to be listened to by you human beings of earth for a long time, because your belief in all the false religions, sects, ideologies and various false philosophies, as well as in politics, keeps you imprisoned as if by steel claws. As a result, you will continue to allow these and the falsehoods of the false prophets to be spread by religious and sectarian ecclesiastics, around whom you cluster in blind belief, in obedience and listening to their lies, saying that you should carry weapons in order to fight against those who are teaching the truth of creation and its laws and recommendations. And the false prophets and those of you who believe in them will speak about fairness, something which you however truly do not know. Therefore you will commit murder in your delusion and fanaticism, as has already occurred in the case of religious and fanatical terrorists. Finally, there will no longer be any order amongst you human beings of earth, because vice and addictions, greed for might, jealousy, hatred, revenge and retribution are spreading everywhere. Many amongst you are yielding to the urge to kill your fellow human beings, meaning that unbounded murder and destruction will take place more and more all over the world. Therefore, it will be as it has never before been, that you human beings will judge according to your blood and belief, that you as parents will cast out your own children, and you as adults and young people will cast out the aged. And you will increasingly close your eyes to crimes that occur in your sight, to rapes of helpless and defenseless women, to sexual abuse of children, as well as to evil and often fatal guilt acts against your fellow human beings who are old, handicapped, weak and vulnerable. Increasingly, all kinds of human achievements will be deliberately and maliciously destroyed, plundered and robbed. Deceitfulness will be practiced, and more lies and calumnies will prevail, as well to your own advantage. The greed for profit amongst those of you who control the use of foodstuffs, their planting and processing, will lead to more and more hungry people joining the population of Earth, and it will be terrible to see the bones of the starving projecting through their skin, and how their wounds will fester, suppurate and be attacked by vermin. And it will become ever more terrible how many of you human beings will be driven, harried and killed like harmful game, whilst many others will flee and lose their lives in many ways during their flight. And yet, as is already the case today, the majority of you human beings of Earth will not pay any heed, because you turn your face away from the suffering of the refugees, and do not do anything to enable them to live in their homeland, work and lead a life of dignity. Increasingly, you will only look after yourselves, and you will only be able to assuage your guilty conscience by giving small donations to the poor and suffering, although your real motivation will be for everyone to think that you are a good person and you receive the small donations back many times over. Truly, the price of a human life is becoming ever cheaper, and more trafficking of human beings as slaves is going on, whether as slave workers, for prostitution, in the mercenaries, or for organ trading, for the purpose of which healthy human beings amongst you are abducted, kidnapped, sold and slaughtered like livestock, to be robbed of your viscera, organs and body parts. And all of the people amongst you who are greedy for profit, you who conduct this sort of trafficking or are yourselves murderers, slaughterers and butchers of carcasses, you will fight even over the blood of your murdered victims, just as you would over their skin and bones, and this has already become so commonplace at this time, when the third millennium is opening, and therefore things will get very much worse in this way in the time to come. And human trafficking will not only be performed increasingly with adults, specifically with young women for the purposes of prostitution, but also with men for the purposes of slave work, as well as with children, who are put to work and sexually abused by pedophiles. And everything is becoming more and more commonplace in this form, just as the inviolability of your human dignity is being increasingly disregarded and forgotten. Therefore, it will be that you human beings of Earth will become increasingly brutalized, unscrupulous, and will lapse further and further into savagery. Lying and deception will rule the world to an increasing extent, namely through the beggars amongst you just as much as through those of you who live as good citizens in normal and good prosperity, and this will be the case right up to you rich and ruling people. Therefore, as never before in the history of earthly humanity, lying and deception, as well as deceit, falseness and calumny, as well as servitude through government, will be held as the truth, and an ever greater calamity will be built upon it. And it will be increasingly the case that you people will be treated like animals for the slaughter, implanted with electronic data chips by means of which you will be controlled and robbed of freedom by authorities, public offices and governments, although in your ignorance you will think that you live as free people, although you are in fact servants of the governments. In this way, public authorities, official bodies and those in government will rule over you in a way that has never happened before, meaning that you will no longer chart the course of your own fate in the collective, because this will be done by those who exercise total power and control over you. In this way, every one of you will be a servant and slave of authorities, public bodies and governments, or of those people in power and their vassals, who possess power in this respect. Still, in the early part of the third millennium, there might be time for you human beings of Earth to prevent this if you would unify as humanity, and rise up against these threatening future machinations of governments and the scientists and technicians who obey them, in order to prevent the threat named in this regard from occurring. Overpopulation on Earth, it must be said again and again, will continue to rise due to the senselessness and the irresponsibility of your humanity of Earth. However, this also happens due to the machinations of governments, their authorities and public bodies which promote offspring and act with equal levels of irresponsibility, as well as the sectarian stupidities of the Catholic Church, which can indeed be called criminal and unlawful, or else those of the Pope, clerics and priests, who are misteaching the go forth and multiply as a deceitful law of God. As a result, there will be ever more human beings, who will have less and less space in which to live, and this space will become so small, that you will end up by trampling one another to death. And you will move about more and more, spilling over the boundaries of your home country and leaving it, thereby dying, although very many of you will also travel the world aimlessly, with the consequence that you will intermix and form liaisons more and more, leading to increasing numbers of families being torn apart and more mixed-race peoples arising, whilst pure peoples disappear to an increasing extent. As a result,
well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. It's amazing information about the third millennium. You're listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and we'll be back. Thanks for listening. Have a good evening.